Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this Friday edition of the True Life Podcast. We are here with the one and only Ranga joining us on Friday. What an interesting week we've had, Ranga. How are you, my friend?
I think that's why we shouldn't have the conversation before going live, George.
I know.
Because I was really sad to begin with about the passing of the Queen, and you just made it funny enough for me to have this smile, right? Yeah.
You have to.
But on a serious note, though, as much as it started as a joke in my head, having read all the things I've been reading for the last 2 hours, I don't take it too seriously, but have you heard about the Operation London Bridge?
I have. I saw a short video that this really cool person sent to me, and I really enjoyed it. It's interesting. Can you tell people about it who may not have seen it?
So, Operation London Bridge is the funeral plan for Queen Elizabeth. And the first time that was drafted, I think it was late 1960s or early 1970s. I think they wanted the Queen to die at that point, just so it's late by 50 years, I guess. So, they did a lot of updates and adjustment to the plan as it was going on. So, the video goes about saying what's going to happen on the day of the death till the like date 10, date 11, date 12, where the actual funeral might happen, right? And within those 2 weeks, we're gonna see a lot of major bank holidays, stock market close, and pretty much closing of all things just out of respect. I respect you. I'm gonna stop my life the way I know it, so I can respect you, right? And India is quite interesting. A country that was under the British Empire has declared a state mourning. I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah. So a day of silence or day of I don't know what mourning means anymore. I had an idea before, but not anymore. What do you think mourning is? What do we need to do when people die, George?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's kind of a weird paradox because on the topic of the Queen dying, I'm not sure if it is people should be sad and then reflect about what happened, or they should see the sun rising and seeing a new morning, like a new time being born. I think that what mourning should be if we look in the terms of someone we love and respect dying. And I don't know that is what the world thinks about the Queen. But on the topic of mourning, I think it's a time of reflection. It's a time to look back and see and care about and learn from and respect what somebody we love has done for us. But like I said, I don't know that's what the Queen has done. And in some ways, I think what we're looking at is the residue of the medieval ages. I don't think that the world should stop because some particular royal family who was granted the grace of God to rule by divine nature over people. I don't believe that. I look back and I see the royal family committing heinous crimes against people. I see them just deciding to rule over people with divine power for no reason. There's a lot of things that the royal family has done, that is doing, that I think the rest of the world doesn't agree with. And so, when I see all these articles about the Queen dying and I see the level of propaganda being put out about what an incredible person this was, forgive me if I sound like I am dancing on the grave of someone. I'm not trying to do that. However, there's a lot of oppression that happened. There's a lot of negative vibes that are still circulating throughout the world because of the actions of the quote unquote royal family. So when it comes to mourning, I think that, there are probably some good things that have been done. But as an American, as a country who was founded on the breaking away from King George, even though he has a great name with George, I think that we can learn a lot by looking back at history and understanding that be it a dictator, a queen, or a king, a democracy, the government always doesn't have the best intention of the individual in mind. So I know that was a roundabout way of mourning, but that's what I think, Ranga. That's my idea of mourning. What say
That's
you?
that's brilliant. I agree with you on the fact that morning should be that period of being reflective. And in case of a person who's loving and who was loved, you take time to appreciate all those. I'm not a person who believes that personally, because I feel like the appreciation has to be there when we are still alive.
Yes.
Because I would rather have people spend time with me, talk with me when I'm here, rather than have a few regrets when I'm gone. Because it wouldn't matter anyway. I just have a slight preference to the other. So, keeping that meaning aside, if we really come back to the self reflective phase, which is termed as mourning, one of the things that we need to reflect upon is the question of, do we still need monarchy? Because having seen that video for the plans for the next 10, 12 days, right? So many things are happening so slowly, right? Closure, keeping the dead body on the street for 100,000, not on the street, inside another building, for 100,000 people to have their final. I'm sorry, I don't comprehend what happens during those things does wait, yet King Charles couldn't wait. So that happened. I had no idea of what was going to happen immediately. I don't look into these things. So
Yeah.
something of this big happens, big, right, happens, and you get a chance to look into news. And I was wondering, this is a separate line. The naming him king and the ceremony for that is not relevant to the funeral thing. Seems like two different things, two different ways at which it's happening. One has to be done before people realize.
Mm.
You give a little bit amount of space. I think it's the time. You put it beautifully. I couldn't agree with you more. Morning is reflective phase. It's quite a reflective phase, but they're not giving that reflective face. We're just trying to give this term mourning, over which we keep on appreciating a person. And I saw a lot of LinkedIn posts which said, it's brave that she held down a job for 7 decades. I, I don't know what to say about that. What do you think? I want to kind of have a different way to this podcast. I want you to share more opinions today, because I want to learn why I'm really at loss of words. I usually don't write anything because I speak, and these are things I cannot, remember. So I'll read you a few things that I wrote
Sure.
from the video before I ask the next question.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal your podcast, by the way.
Yeah, please, please.
I'm taking true life from you. So one of the things they said is, so we're going to start using all public television, BBC and so on, to start showcasing Queen's documentary, which is nice. You get to learn stuff, but you're also supposed to be refraining from comedy for the whole day. Okay. And this thing I already discussed, close everything out of respect. Stop everything. A person who is at the bottom most ladder, what step of the ladder in the capitalistic system, is surviving on meeting the work that they literally make their ends meet by working that day. So that's fine. Like, the queen has gone, right? 41 gun salute. I don't know, George. I'm at a lot of loss of words. I'm sorry.
It's
Okay.
okay.
Back
So,
to
yeah.
stock and bank closure again on the day of funeral, which is 10th day. So yes,
it's
continue.
here's what I see. Transitions of power are a time of vulnerability. If you look throughout history, you can look back to the medieval ages, and if you, King Ranga, were in the province next to me and you died, and I knew that your family was a little bit rambunctious, if I knew maybe your son was waiting for you to die to take power, but your uncle was a little bit upset about it, it's a very good time for me to strike, whether it be at the hearts of the people, whether it be me striking into the relationships of the family. I think that that's one reason why you see things moving so quickly, is because there is chaos. There is, whenever a monarch dies, whenever somebody in a position of power, I'll put it another way, whenever a mob boss dies, the family begins to show the cracks in which it is vulnerable at. The foundation begins to break, or at least the parts of the foundation that are fractured become seeable. On the topic of the things being put in place, maybe it's coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. I think a coincidence is what you get when you apply a bad theory. And so when I see the takeover of state television, I see somewhat of the Chinese model being implemented. When I see no humor, that to me sounds like a great way to stop people from acting out, because the very foundation of humor comes from pain, and they don't want people expressing the pain. When I think about bank holidays, I think about the economy of Europe. Might they need bank holidays without the Queen dying? I mean, it seems pretty close that Europe's on the cusp of being fractured. The whole monetary system over there, for the first time since the euro's been born, it's below the dollar.
Yeah.
The banks in Europe are unable to pay their bills. If you just look at Greece, you look at Italy, you look at France, like, people are rioting like it's like they're ready to storm the Bastille. So I don't think it's a coincidence that all of these draconian laws are being put in place under the guise of the Queen's death. I don't think that that's a sign of respect. I think it's a sign of fear. Europe's been under a lot of pressure for a lot of time, and ever since the Euro project has been somewhat of a failure. There was this idea where they could bring together Europe under the guise of one flag, and they started to do it through a currency. However, they've never been able to bond the people there. And what scares me to death is that both world wars have started in Europe. A united Germany. I just read an article about Germany deciding that, hey, we are going to put some troops in the streets to make sure that there's no riots. We're going to make sure that we go back to wearing masks because we think that these are just ways of masking the problems. And isn't it funny that they want to mask you up the same way they want to mask the problems in society? I guess my answer to your question would be transitions of power are tricky. And be it the Queen dying, be it the European Union beginning to fail, or the Bank of International Settlements no longer having the power that it's always had, I think these are all transitions of power, and I think that they're leading to a head right now. Does that answer your question?
Definitely. I it leads me to another question. Yeah. In a moment of vulnerability, we are talking about transfer of power. And you gave an example where I was a king, you're a neighboring king. My question is, where is the neighboring monarch which is trying to occupy this? Do we have another monarchy in place which is going to take over? Or who are they actually fighting? What is the fear, right? And the countries that are under the monarch, again, I don't understand how that works, right? Under the monarch, so many of countries. I think the last podcast we were discussing how it is difficult to organize and manage a bigger group, right? So we have a smaller group and the leader is much more efficient in managing, and that's why you have smaller bodies existing, and they all come under a bigger thing, and those are just labels. So
yeah,
in that idea, how is uh, I don't know the exact numbers, the amount of Commonwealth countries and the other countries which are under the monarch, how it does it affect them moving forward, transition of queen to king? Would they, like, if not for the monarch, are the countries going to stop existing? Are they going to stop running? Are they going to get hit by something? So what's going to happen?
It's a great question. And I think that that question is on the mind of the people in power right now. If you look at the power structure, if you were Australia, why are you under the queen? Like, you have to begin to I spent some time in Australia, and some of the people that I spoke to had a great affinity for the United States of America. And I was told multiple times, wow, we wish we could break away from the queen just like you did. And this was not that long ago, and I'm thinking to myself, like, it gave me a glimpse into the average Australian's ideas about the way they're governed. Like, why do they? I mean, they're pretty much their own country. Like, why do they kick so much money back to them? Like, if we can look at the monarchy as an antiquated system, then two guys sitting from the comfort of their own computers in different parts of the world, if we look at it and say this is an antiquated system, don't the leaders in that country also have to look at it like this is kind of an antiquated system? And I would say that if you look at what's happened, if you look at the way COVID hit places the hardest, Australia was locked down really hard. Parts of Canada were locked down really hard. These are sort of territories owned by the crown. It's not that far of a leap to say that, hey, we know the queen's dying. We need to put some rules in place to secure our territory. Like, let's flip it around. Let's say that you're the king, Ranga, and your territories, of which you're far away from, are getting upset and you're going to die. Don't you think that maybe your son and daughter would be like, okay, how do we keep these places in order? Like, all of a sudden the contracts that you made, that you ratified, the business deals with the other monarchs that you made for these territories, all the money that you're getting kicked back, you're dying. Don't you think your sons and daughters are going to get a little bit nervous? Might they have plans for the empire? So I think that sort of answers the question about the tensions in these far off places. Like, yeah, the power is gone, and there is a real appetite for revolt. I don't know if that's the right word or if it's just taking things back, but I think that there's a real possibility that these countries wake up and decide we don't need some sort of religious figure that rules by divine right to take all our money. Like, why do they own the land? Like, this should be opening up questions that make people in power very uncomfortable. Why do people need to be ruled by divine right? I think it's the individual's divine right to rule their family. I think it's the individual's divine right to do what's right for the community. And I don't mind paying taxes or paying tribute as long as that money goes to the well-being of the community. But I think what we're seeing is a long history of corruption, a long history of decadence. Look at the way these people live their lives. It's decadence. It's gross. It's disgusting. And you see, like, look at who was the prince that was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. Why is there no justice? Why is it that there is a group of people who label themselves above everyone else? I think people are waking up to that, and I'm thankful for that. I think it needs to happen.
Sometimes, yes, the waking up process seems slow,
Yeah.
or maybe I've just become crazy too much too soon because of, again, illegal drugs, right? What I see is in a moment of it can be seen as a moment of opportunity to revolt.
Yes.
In that case, I don't think revolution is a bad thing. It's not taking a step back, because revolution, I think, comes into place anytime on a bigger level there is a status quo that needs to be changed. It's very difficult to initiate that process of change. But in moments like that, I think countries like India, instead of being diplomatic, could just stay away from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
instead of giving a day off or mourning for something that is not part of your life in your current model, it is just purely from the past, right? And right now, in order to maintain the so-called alliances, or yeah, basically be diplomatic, like I don't mean any harm, I'm still like, it still seems we are subservient to something,
Yeah.
right? Like, I am a slave, I'm not gonna say it out loud because I'm an independent nation, but I'm gonna honor by doing so and so, which you guys have, planned, and you're doing it. So by doing the same things, I honor that. We shall not question whatever decisions you make, right? Wherever the power goes, we're fine with it, right? And where these decisions are made, yes, at the end of the day, it comes down to a smaller group of people. But the question is always the motive, right? Like, what is totally affecting their decisions? And most of the time, right now, given the current state of affairs, money seems to be the only dominant thing. I do not think there is, yes, with money also comes power. I do not think there is anything existing out of these two that is actually happening here. You were talking about the taxes, right? And I think today morning, word by word, I had the same conversation with my partner saying that I do not, more than saying I do not mind giving taxes, I'm glad to do that. In some way, there should be redistribution of the wealth.
Yeah.
And there are so many people who are exploited, and the body of organization which collects taxes and tries to remit it, make it, equal wealth. I want to be part of it. I do
Yeah.
know that I'm way above average income. Like, if you take the whole population, I'm sitting in the top 1%, even top 1%. We do not know the amount of actual exploitation that's happening, right? Top 1% might be exaggeration because we actually have too many billionaires and too many millionaires. So let's take them out of the account, and if you consider a normal working human being, we still, there are a lot of exploitation that happens. Given that, and given the taxes, and the wedding that happened 3 years back, I I wasn't experienced with psychedelics or anything. I was living a traumatized life. But even in that place, my question was, why is no one talking about it in a different way? It covered pages in newspaper, and in India, newspapers covered in the central pages, 2 3 pages about the wedding, and people are talking about how, oh, this is a great progress for. Um, including a black member to the royal family. That's a great step. And no one talked about the 40 million Canadian dollars or 30 to 35 million pounds that were spent. And this is the money that comes from people. Are these questions? I'm not saying no one is asking this question, but this is not reaching the mainstream conversation. Today, after the death, I think, yesterday, there was a post by this person, I forget, um, who said about, this is a chance to end the oppression. And my family has been a lot, has gone through a lot because of the royal family. And I simply don't think we need to, mourn. And Twitter removed the post. And before that, Jeff Bezos is posting that, so this personality who posted about so and so, right, the black person, she was a influential person, let's say. So Jeff Bezos is here commenting saying that, I don't think this person is trying to be helpful. We should, with the idea that we shouldn't talk about stuff when a person is dead, right? You were saying, you get the thought. Why do you think you get the thought that it seems that you're dancing on the grave of the dead? If that thought comes to you, I think that arises truly out of fear. There is nothing wrong in having any kind of
Yeah.
discussion. And don't get me wrong, I had the same thought. Is it a wrong time to talk? But what other time is there to talk about this? Because it's a global thing now, global event, right?
Yeah.
My LinkedIn, I do not have much contacts apart from psychedelics. So uh, everything is about psychedelics, and everything turned out to be Queen yesterday. I'm like,
Yeah.
where are these guys coming from? Right? And they convey the sadness, or like, yeah, it's funny, as if like people get into this idea that of immortality, and even though they know the truth, death is there, when it happens, it seems such a shocking event. And let's just forget everything, queen stuff. You have a human being in a developed country. We have a average life expectancy of 83 for female and 78 for male. And in a third world country, it's 60 or less,
Yeah.
right? So you take 96, compare it to that. Even stats, you know, oh, you shouldn't bring science in when emotions are there. Emotions make you human, science doesn't, right? Yeah, sure. Right. So yeah, my mind, I I know I saw the your post about creativity and imagination, and it all went, yeah, this is really my imagination is kind of towards just this. I'm just really curious of what are the things the monarch has done and how they are helping. And I don't know if I will have the right source to get the answers, you know. And there are many people talking about just being proud of the work she has done. So in that case, I think the credit has to go to billions and billions of people.
You have written some notes about, or you had done a small bit of research on what are some of the memorable things that people are talking about the Queen. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. So I think there were. I don't think I wrote anything from that, but I can tell you what are the
Sure.
things. It's the oldest queen, the longest living monarch, that was until yesterday, wealthiest monarch. Her face is there on the most amount of currencies. And just on that note, they're going to start taking the currency slowly and putting in new notes with king's face. And long live the queen is going to change to long live the king.
Wow,
Right.
what an amazing life she must have lived. I mean, she's the longest living monarch. Wow, congratulations. And the wealthiest. What that's so something to be so proud of. Like, of course I'm being sarcastic. Let's talk about, for any young person watching this, I want you to use your imagination and your ability of creativity to think what you could do for the world if you were the longest living monarch. If you were the richest monarch throughout history, what could you do to make the world better? Could you put your face on more money? Or maybe there's some programs that you could do that would make the world better. Here's a creativity idea. Here's an exercise in imagination. What would Princess Diana have done had she been the queen? Here's a good idea to think about. What kind of policies could you do for children in third world countries? Do you think maybe if you had access to the most money in the world that you could create policies that would fundamentally change the way a child in a third world nation has to grow up in this world? Do you think you could reify education? Do you think maybe you could make the world better for hundreds of thousands of people? Or do you think maybe you could make the world better for millions of people? Or do you think maybe you could sit in your palace and count your money? Like, that's what it seems to me like they do. Like, I don't know what they do, but I don't see people around the world celebrating her life because she did things for people. And if we can for a minute reimagine what the world could look like? Because I think now when we talk about transitions of power and we talk about the world becoming better, I think we do have opportunities here. And when someone passes, we have a new opportunity to recreate the future. And I think that can be done here. I think that we're looking at a world where an absence of power means an opportunity of people. So some things I think we can do is we can reimagine what it means to be a leader. What does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be on the cutting edge of the future? I think that's worth investigating. I think it's worth talking about. I also think it's important to understand. You had said something about when we look at power and we look at the queen passing on, I think it's important for countries, be it India or Australia or Canada, or even people in the United States, the cusp of power we're on. I think it's important to be careful what you fight, because I've heard it said you become what you fight. There seems to be a cycle. When power dies, a new power takes over, and then those people sometimes fall into the trap, the cycle of becoming corrupt. I think we have an opportunity to not only see things different, but be different. We don't need to fight the power. We need to not do what the power has done. I think you run into it becomes very dangerous. I think you become susceptible to becoming what you hate when you fight power, because you begin to use the same tactics that power used. Why not just decide not to play by their rules? Why does Australia have to, or Canada have to, or India have to? Why do they have to abide by the same rules? Okay, the monarch has passed. Now we're just not going to abide by your rules. The contract's over. Thanks for coming. No, I don't think we're going to play by that rule. We're going to do our own thing now. It doesn't have to be violent. It doesn't have to be angry. It just has to be an understanding. No, we're not going to put the king's face on the money. Sorry. You guys, that money's no longer good here. Thank you. We had a great time, and we've had some good times and some bad times, but we are no longer going to use the king's money. The queen has died. That contract is over. We now are going to put Ranga's face on the money. And we are now going to put we're going to put a picture of the sacred cow on the money. We're going to put our own face on our own money, because we have a new beginning. We have a new idea of what our country is going to be. And unfortunately, your ideas no longer work in our country. I think that there could be a amicable divorce, and I think this is a perfect time for these countries. Like, there's no reason why you have to follow their rules anymore. The queen died. So has the government in which ruled you. Now you have your own government. What a better way to just break up and walk away. I think that there's a real opportunity in imagination, and I think creativity plays a huge role. And I think that this is a moment that frees everybody from the iron fist that is a royal family. It frees people from the divine right of ruling. Hey, this person has passed away, and so has their rules. Now you have an opportunity. You, as the people of the United States, you as the people of Canada, you the people of whatever country that the Commonwealth ruled. The Commonwealth no longer rules. It's such a freeing moment. And I think that might be the greatest gift of Queen Elizabeth, is this gift of her freeing the people by dying. She has allowed people to become free. Her last gift is a gift of amnesty. And it's such a beautiful thing.
But I think we're a little late to that. Because I think the coronation happened yesterday, right? At least for namesake. The actual ceremony is tomorrow, right? That's the part. We still have two different things. No one cares about tomorrow. Maybe they convinced that people should care about tomorrow, but the actual event happened yesterday. The moment of passing and letting other people know that the queen has passed and there is a king, right? There is no gap. And that is the moment. Yeah.
Well, I think that there's a time difference, right? Like I think Australia might be a day ahead, right? So how does that factor in? Like maybe that nullifies the whole contract because it's a different day, Maybe they observe time differently. I think that we're failing to use our imagination. We're failing to be creative. We're failing to be creative here. Like, I think that the governments are now free. They no longer have to abide by any of the rules held by the Commonwealth, because that contract is done and over with. And what is Britain going to do? Is Britain going to send their army to Australia? They're going to send their army to Canada? I think we should be talking to the Canadian truckers about this. Let's get them on board.
I know, right? It's these things happened when there was a lot more ignorance.
Yes.
Right? Back in those days, there was the very few who knew how to be on top. And one of the things I think part of the today morning discussion was how there are fights between people in India. One major fight that has been happening down the line is caste. Let's not go into it today. But another religion fights, most of it, I believe, right? It's just an opinion. I think it started from the Britain rule, because I've heard this since when I was a kid, but I never understood until a few years ago that divide and conquer.
Yeah, huge.
United we stand, divided we fall. It's
Beautiful.
it seems so simple, but when we are fighting fellow Indians in that namesake, right? Like given the context, and there are people who are arguing that India was weak enough to let Britain, and so they deserved it. So I'm not going to go to the question of what happened, is it right or not, because there is a way, and then there is a way life flows, right?
Yeah.
So slowly we are waking up, and it's fine. It's always the question of what you can do right now. So there are so many things that have happened, and when that happened, we didn't live in an age of information like this. I don't think you and I would have been people who could just, first of all, we wouldn't have connected. Now we have technology to connect and have a weekly thing. We're able to talk, and it's freeing when you see it. Why are we not able to see this at a global level as a country as such? Like, I didn't have voice back then, so I listened to you. Right now, I think I have my voice, right? Like I have the confidence to stand. So who is gonna stay? Because now I think just if one or two countries start, because I think most of them are in the bandwidth of breaking out, right? It depends on, they don't want to be the person who put their head out first.
Mhm.
It's really difficult to venture into the unknown, right? I think this is one of the things I've been telling. The main reason for my podcast is just raising awareness of things that I've been through, as much as futile it can be, or as a joke it can be taken. For me, this is what happened, and this got me into liberation. So if you had a similar experience in life, maybe you also, use it. Because when I was caught in this phase of doubting, there were people I looked up to who were able to help me. I think right now we are in that same place of doubting, right? And if there are nations which can start just asking questions of why should we do it, you know that will be enough, right? That will bring forth a lot more than we think. Because everyone, until they are honest, they seem submissive.
Yeah.
You might wonder, from, let's say, the Australian person you was talking to, they might say good thing about us, and then you have Canada doing this, right? I'm sorry, I lose my chain of thought there, but my point being, it's, someone has to step at this point and ask, why are we still doing this, right? Who is it benefiting, and what is actually happening? Are there, you take a government away today, it's not going to be a good thing. There'll be a huge amount of riots,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
government in that sense is a good thing, police is a good thing, right? But what is monarchy doing at this point? If you take away monarchy, is it going to collapse,
Mm-mm.
or is it going to just go through a normal period of transition into something beautiful? You see UK getting in and out of uh, European Union, right? And it seems like, you talk to a person like me, that seems like a joke. What is getting out, what is coming back in? But on an economical level, I understand it does have implications, right? So in that manner, if you're able to ask the question of who is it going to affect, right? If it's just going to affect the royal family, it's a fraud. It's a fraud of a system that was created fully self-serving. And that's where it all comes back to being aware of what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
The whole spiritual game of trying to understand, we are not just restricted to legacy. We get trapped in it. I am this, and I keep this going forward, right? And it's so funny, like, queen dies and his son becomes king, and you would expect, like, oh, the mother passes away, the son is like 20, 30, and he's like, the son is only 73. Yeah, but my mind is kind of around that area, trying to see it from different sides. And yeah.
It's Ranga, I'm so excited for your podcast. And I let me you said something about India and about getting rid of government, and speaking to that point. I'm not sure if you see this, and I want to point it out to you. Look at what you've done. Like, you've left this world that you lived in. You had an idea that you were going to be this type. I'm going to be this label. I'm going to be a mechanical engineer. And you probably, there's no doubt in my mind, Ranga, whatever you decide to do, you would be good at it. There's no doubt in my mind. So you decided, okay, I come to Canada. I have these expectations that are put on me to be this certain thing. And you say, you know what? I can't do this. It's not that I can't do it. It's I don't want to do it. It's not who I am. I'm going to be Ranga, the psychedelic advocate. I am going to be Ranga, the psychologist. I am going to be a psychotherapist. I am going to be this thing that I want to be. And so you throw off these chains, these labels, these things that were thrust upon you. And it's so interesting to me that you're an advocate, because you are you're not only preaching, you're practicing. Hey, I have decided not to become these labels that were thrust upon me. It's not that different than a country throwing off the labels of the monarchy. You know, it's the micro and the macro, as above, so below. And I think that's why you're such a perfect advocate for this. You have done these very things that you're talking about. And that is what lends you the power to speak to younger people or to older people or to people who are ready to wake up and go through these things, because you have faced them. You have in the face of people wanting you to do stuff. I know that back home, there are people that say, hey, look at Ranga. He's look at this guy, man. He's not doing what he's supposed to. I'm going to go talk to his family. And that's not easy to face. A lot of people fear that, and rightfully so. They fear not being loved. They fear their parents looking at them in a way that is not in the light. They fear the not getting the approval. And that's the same thing that our governments fear about, or that's the same thing that people fear about their governments. Hey, I'm doing this wrong. Hey, I need to get my approval. I am not following the label that was thrust upon me. So for me to see you and your podcast moving forward, it brings almost damn tears to my eyes, because I see someone practicing what they preach. And you cannot follow somebody, you cannot listen to somebody, or you cannot take seriously someone who says one thing but does another. And so I just wanted to comment on that, because I think that the same thing that happened to you is a roadmap for what can happen to countries if they choose to stand up. It's something that we can all do. If you're willing to stand up in the face of authority, and you don't have to be violent about it, but you do have to say, I'm not going to participate in this. This is not right for me. And as scary as that is, and it is scary, it's difficult to leave everything you've ever known. It's difficult to stand in the face of someone you love and say, no, I'm not doing this anymore, because it's not right for me. And I would rather take my own road than go down this road you have laid out for me. Even though this road you've laid out seems nice, it's a prison for me. And this road is scary. It's difficult, but I'm going to take it anyway. And I think that is the awakening we're talking about. Be it an individual like yourself, be it an individual like me, or Paul, or Ben, or any of these other people we've been talking to. I think that is the same path we see happening in our own lives, is the same path we're seeing happen on a grand scale. The same way you have left the country you are from is the same way that Australia or India can leave the country whose rule they are under. And I think if you look at it from that angle, then it becomes possible. Like, a lot of people are saying, well, what can I do, George? Or how am I supposed to fight against the Queen of England? Or how am I supposed to fight against my oppressive government? And the answer to that is stand up for what you believe in. Take your own path. Yeah, it's scary, but it's worthwhile. And if the individual begins to stand up and the individual begins to do what's right for them, money be damned. Because sometimes the path of the righteous man is not a path of the rich man, not in monetary values, but in well-being, in seeing clearly. It's the right path. And so I think that is the path people can choose to take if they want to make the world better, is to stand up and do what's in their heart, to stand up and do what's right, even if it's scary. And I think if individuals do that, pretty soon communities do that. When communities do that, pretty soon states do that. And when states do that, pretty soon the entire nation goes that way. And that gets us away from fighting the very thing we hate and becoming the very thing we hate, and allows us to transition into a world that is better, a world that sees the individual as an individual, but still part of the community, if that kind of makes sense. If we're all moving forward on our own path while respecting the people around us, then we move forward into a world that doesn't have monarchs, We move forward into a world that doesn't have a form of oppressive government. We move forward into a world where each individual is their own government and has their own sovereign rules, but is completely respectful of the people next to them. And I see it happening from your story to the Queen dying. I see the same story taking place.
Don't dance on the grave. Not yet.
Yeah.
No,
It's
the
so
one
crazy.
bites the dust.
Yeah.
I love this song.
There's only one queen, and I'll rest in peace, Freddie Mercury.
I love that part. You did say a lot of things here. It's most of it tied down to yes, individual level, right? My first question was, societal expectations are there. Let's not forget the national controversies and
Yes.
stuff happening. Going back to my story, it was this societal pressure, no one directly saying anything to my face, yet it is there,
Yeah.
because that's the voice that runs so many times that kind of gets you depressed. Because if you actually lived in a reality where someone said something and either you cared for it or you didn't care, life would be simple.
Wait,
It's
can
that what
I pause you right there for a minute?
Yes.
Because so when you say no one told you that, but it
Yes.
was being communicated to you.
Yes.
I think that there's something like, and that part for me is this silent expectations, this silent, forcible communication being pushed into your head, whether it's through a stern look from your parents or your friends saying stuff behind your back, or even the television or media saying like, you don't have enough money, you're never going to be married, you're not going to have kids. These are all ways of this communication hammering you. So I just wanted to add that real quickly, because even though they're not telling you, they're still communicating it to you.
I think we went into the same conversation in our first podcast, and I wouldn't, stop you from saying this. I think this conversation has to happen a million times. You know, I read this LinkedIn post the other day, which was nice. When you're getting tired of the message, it's starting to land, right? So
That's really good.
sometimes I don't want to be boring and repetitive, yet I feel we are not always there listening to what is actually being said, right? So and we are just going about doing things without presence. I think all these communication have really, really, really strong uh, pressing forces against you, right? And you take it and you absorb it in, and as if like you're like this kid, right? The kid doesn't have prejudices against a particular thing. Like I'm sure a kid, you let it in front of fire or water, it will do crazy stuff, right? Crazy because you're gonna stop existing as a kid and become a dead body. So don't do it, right? So it's our survival instinct that kicks in, but the kid doesn't have prejudices, right? So we are soaking in the environment, right? We come in, and as humans, our brains are very prematurely developed so that most of the development can happen in the surrounding, so that you're more adapted to how this surrounding is, right? And there is no clear distinction to like university education, right? You finish this course, you get 80 plus, and then they have this what is it called, degree ceremony, coronation. No, that's coronation is for the king, I'm sorry, where they put the gown and stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
Graduation.
yeah, it's as simple, yeah, graduation ceremony,
Right.
right?
Whatever.
You don't have that in life where you cross over that line of realizing that I've just been soaking in everything. Maybe I'm not as powerful as a being that I thought, or maybe I am, but ignorance has in some way has stopped me to truly soak in. Rather, we kind of soak it in without letting it. Um this reminds me of Alan Watts' quote where he says, right, to hold the breath is the same as losing your breath. And it blows my mind. It's like such a simple statement, right?
Yeah.
And it blows my mind. So, in that case, we can soak in the environment, but we have to once in a while let it out. That we are. I don't think that teaching is there from person to person or to a kid from outside. I think that part of the education comes from within, and that for that, I think the precursor or the huge motivator is suffering,
Mm.
right? And when I say no one told me directly, and these communications are there, right? These communications take voices in head, right? And right now the amount of voices have reduced to being less. And I know wherever the noises I see where the work needs to be done, it's mostly with food and stuff. But it used to be so much of this title games, status games, right? And one of the things, coming back to my story, I wanted to ask the question, where is this noise coming from? Before understanding I am creating this, you always think there is an external source, right? So who are saying? Yes, of course, my dad is saying. My mom has this expectations. Maybe she's not brave enough or demanding enough of me, but my dad is still, as the ownership, much more ownership. In a sense, they kind of own you, right? They don't
Hmm.
want to. It's not the idea they which I think parents go with, but it's they think it's love, the attachment that they get, and the responsibility in keeping them safe. Even though it's a temporary game, they get into it forever, and then it becomes a ownership at some point, right? You see the boundary kind of disappearing between I'm guiding you versus you're following me, right? So you got to follow in the footsteps of this is the thing, this is I've done these things, so raise up the bar a bit, right? Keep it going, right? If you have your dad doing something crazy, like one of the things that happens with actors and their sons, if you see, right, uh, most of the time they are so much compared to their father, because oh, he has done this, without understanding that this is a totally different being. This just,
Yeah.
that's where I believe parents do not give birth to kids. God creates them through this medium. So everyone is an individual as such. These are mediums through which it's happening. There is no ownership to the thing, right? We all go poop in our toilet. It all gets collected. We don't go fighting for ownership. Oh, my poop is also here. It is, I am feeding the plants or I'm doing this. None of those, because I don't know why I said because I don't think there is because after that. But coming back to my life, I wanted to find the external source. My dad, mom was there. But what is this society that I conceive of it within my head? It mostly came down to relatives, the immediate people that are, without knowing, brainwashing your parents. Your parents become that to other people's kids. So one of the thing I realized, this is what they are doing. They kind of force their kids into doing something, and they, because they think society expects that,
Hmm.
and that creates a loop. They go on to say the same thing without realizing, if they just stop talking at that point, the society they conceive stops existing.
Hmm.
So this was, I don't know if I lost you there, but this was
Nope.
one way of me realizing that individuals are the ones who get together to form societies and communities. Because as much as it might seem like an obvious thing to you and me, I do not think it was an obvious thing at one point in my life. So this is where I want to introduce this concept of. I think you guys were talking about Whorf theory, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sapir War theory.
it would have been nice for me to join. I know a little about it. Um, it's about how language changes our perception, right?
Yes.
I think there is a famous example of how this culture has 13 different terms for defining snow. So, do they actually perceive, snow in much more detail than the people in the like, let's say in Canada, who just say, "Oh, ice, black ice, and fresh snow," or something
Yeah.
limited terms.
Yeah.
So, coming back to language, I think there is a thing called zone of proximal development in child development. Do you know about that?
No. Tell me.
Zone of proximal development is a term given for kids growing up, but I think it goes through all phases of age, right? So what happens is that when a kid is present, and older people who have a better understanding of language or having a communication, they have to include the kid in the conversation in such a way that 60 to 70% of the words they use, the kid has to understand. So it has to be very simple language, right? And 30% have to be new words. If they do 100% of either the kid doesn't learn anything or the kid doesn't understand anything, right? So that zone where you're able to keep the kid interested, keep the kid motivated in the conversation, because they think they understand, right? And you introduce new words and they get the meaning of the words slowly, right? And this is the same thing I think in one of the podcast Jordan Peterson was saying, right? I think zone of proximal development is just happening for all people. Some people, let's say they think from here, and if someone is communicating from here, they're going to lose them.
Yeah.
So they have to go here, use some examples and analogies that seem really obvious to you, because it might be something that you're doing every single day, right? You take it for granted. We get desensitized to it. So I mean, what other way to think, right? It might come across that, but I think we have to let go of that idea and truly get to the part of how my mind state was when I was there.
Yeah.
Because all the things that seems kind of obvious to me, for example, my beard and hair, I think there have been many days that I have doubted, should I like grow my hair? Because I tried growing my hair in India and you'd get this look from everyone and people you don't even know on the streets. And this is a personal experience, no exaggeration, right? They're asking like, is your parents okay with this? Like, why haven't you got a haircut? And and you're living in a community and you don't at that point realize that they are just poking their nose. You really take it to your heart at that point. You're a 18-year-old kid for the first time trying to do something with like just growing it. Like, I
Yeah.
forgot to cut.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal,
Yeah.
right? And oh, forget India. This happened in the US embassy. So I'm going to New York 3 years back, 2019. It was kind of like this. I go there. A black person was waiting for 40 minutes, and she was telling me, "You're brown, so maybe your wait time is 15 to 20 minutes, right?" And there are 10, 12 white people who are not US citizens who get through the embassy like this, right? So inside, the people are just talking. They're not doing anything, right? Because when the people of their color comes, the process is immediate. Mine wasn't as bad. I was really wondering, like, this black person who has been waiting for 40 minutes, as she said, why was I called before her, right? Forget that. But I go inside. I understand what they do. So it was just 10 seconds of valid, useful information she wanted of me. Where are you going? What's your purpose? When is your return? That took 10 seconds to answer. And you know how much time we talked? Extra 10 minutes. You know what we talked about? My appearance. And you know the question she asked? Do you video call your mom? I said yes. Why is your mom not asking you to shave? If you didn't shave, you wouldn't be able to work in the US embassy. Like,
Wow.
and this is 10 minutes, right? And this is the idea. So when you don't know, but by this point I was confident enough in understanding that appearances truly doesn't matter. You get trapped in some level of very higher form of ego, I would say. The ego gets subtler as you start working towards it. There will always be ego. That's the whole game. I think it's to work and break it, and it'll form in a subtler, in a more disguised way. But I think appearance based is one of the straight head on thing, right? Judging people on appearance. So I think by 2019 I was okay with that what the embassy person said didn't affect me, right? But I don't think I can give those points to people that I want to talk to, because there have been days in my life where I've been doubtful of every single second that I've lived, being doubtful if I'm doing the right thing. That's why I go back to my psychedelic trip where I tell you, right? I was able to breathe. I think my last psychedelic trip, I was able to revisit that point, and my partner and I, we had a discussion over that. Like, why do I stop I just say, you asked me the question, how was your trip, what happened, and I
Yeah.
just go to say, I was able to breathe, because I think that is very important for me, because that was the first time, the first thing I did which didn't feel wrong. To exist before that was a burden, right? And these things, we have completely gone into different territory. I'm really sorry for that, but most of this, I think, comes from the societal pressure, and that is the immediate surrounding of people, right? Slowly you overcome that to realize, I am my individual, I'm going to make changes to help me. And if everyone did that without harming others, that's your point basically. Like, I'm just going to politely, non-violently refuse what you're telling me. No offense, I just don't want to do it, right? I don't want to. And if at individual level everyone does that, now we have a the community, which is going to be happy, because everyone is able to do that. You can have a common thing. For example, when I go to work, I'm not supposed to have my phone out. Is it like imprisoning, or are they treating me like slaves? No, it's for my good to pay more attention at the work. That's all, as simple as that. Likewise, when you collect yourself as a society, you're going to have societal guidelines and not rules. If I want to do something, I just don't want to be part of this. That's all. It can be, agree to disagree. I think most of it I'm trying to understand from our conversations, that if you're just okay with the other person speaking whatever they want, it's fine. We don't need to be enforcing of our own ideas. So this thing at individual level, how does it translate to national level? I have no understanding of that, because where is the pressure coming from? And is all the pressure money related? Yes, my ignorant mind says yes. It is total corruption, which is completely driven by money and nothing else. And I think in Canada, the Prime Minister is announcing one more lockdown, or one more serious work of reducing COVID during the coming winter. And I don't think world is still going with that narrative anymore. People are starting to realize it's might just be one of the biggest scams that happened. And one of the reports that says 1.5 trillion dollars that got transferred from middle class to the really wealthy. 1.5 trillion dollars. I can't comprehend the zeros immediately. I have to go to my book to start writing. It's an insane amount. And if COVID is your point was amazing. I didn't even think of it. Sometimes it comes like this. How all the countries that was under the monarch did more of the restrictions. Yes. So can you share some of the things that you have had in your younger days, where you think you had to do so much out of conformity?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me start just backtracking a little bit, because there's 2 points. You said a lot of awesome stuff, and I just want to touch on that, and then I'll get to some of the things that happened to me when I was younger. You know, I think it's amazing that someone would put themselves in uncomfortable situations so they can learn what that feels like. And you had said something in a previous conversation about, you know what, George, I one of our initial conversations was about death, and you had mentioned that you like to make people feel a little bit uncomfortable. I think kind of what you're saying is that you like to make yourself feel a little bit uncomfortable, because you're putting yourself in these situations where you know the response to you not shaving, having long hair, is going to be society putting pressure on you. And it's this idea of rebellion. And it's almost somewhat in a mystic tradition where someone goes out and they know what they're doing is going to put them in a situation where people cast doubt on them. And rather than get upset about it, you're using it as an experience to learn what that feels like. And I think that's a tremendous thing. I really applaud it. I think that it takes a lot of courage to do, especially to go in with the insight, what can I learn from this? And I think that if more people took that line of questioning, okay, yeah, I look different and people are treating me different. And then they really took time to process how that makes them feel and how that they, coming out of that situation, how can I apply this to my life to make the world around me better? Like, that is tremendous. I really applaud you for that. On another scale, what is the difference between going into a corporate world and then telling you, I think it's similar. Hey, you can't use your phone because it's going to make you more productive. So please put your phone away. The same way the world tells you, hey, why don't you shave that beard so people aren't scared of you? It just makes things more productive. You know what I mean? It's kind of the same thing. It's the same policy of productivity, and it strips you of your humanity. It strips you of your individuality. And in some ways, we're all giving up little pieces of our freedom to make the machine run more polished. I think that that is the idea behind guidelines. That's the idea of taking away a little bit of your freedom to make things run better. And there's a line there, and each individual has to say where their own border is. As far as me having things in conformity when I was younger, you know, I grew up, my parents got divorced when I was 12 or 13. And my father decided, you know what, George? I'll tell you like this. Excuse me. I skipped a grade when I was younger, and I was always the smallest. And I remember in 4th grade, I got into a fight with Paul Arredondo over something. Just, we were playing soccer, and I didn't like that he was laughing at me. And so I started pushing him. And this kid picked me up and threw me on the ground and punched me a couple times. When I look back, it's really funny. So the teachers come and they take us to the principal's office and they sit us down. You boys are fighting. You guys got in a big fight. You hit each other, calling your parents. And I remember, like, my dad came and picked me up, and he got off of work and he came in to pick me up, and he's like, "What happened?" "Well, I got in a fight, Dad." Here's what my dad said. "Did you win?" "No, Dad, I didn't win." Okay. And so his answer was like, that's all he said about that. And then the next week, he put me in he's like, "You're going to learn how to fight." So he put me in this camp, and I learned how to wrestle. You know, and I was like 6 years old. And from that point forward, when I go into the camp and I went to go wrestle someone my own age, he goes, no. You're going to wrestle those kids over there. I'm like, "Dad, those kids are like 8. I'm like 6. And he's like, "Yeah, I know. You start fighting bigger people, you big dummy, you big baby." You know, and from that point forward, I wrestled every weekend. Every day I'd have to go to practice. When I got into middle school, he took me to the high school. "Okay, now you're going to wrestle the high school kids." "Dad, I'm only in 7th grade. I'm going to go wrestle with the high school kids." He's like, "Yeah." So I go wrestle with the high school kids. Those kids just beat me up left and right. But by the time I got to high school, I knew all the kids. Like, I knew all the seniors. I knew all the juniors. I wrestled. I was varsity. You know, I was pretty good for a kid. But that all stemmed from my dad's response to me losing a fight. My mom's response. So I'll take you back to the fight. I come home. My dad had already asked me, "Did you win?" I said no. So I get there. My mom says this, "George, what happened?" I go, "I got in a fight, Mom." My mom sits me down and says, "Sit down, George. You are not going to be a very big and tall man, right? You right now and throughout school, you're going to be younger than everybody and you're going to be smaller than everybody. So you need to learn how to use your words to fight. And if you get in another fight and you don't use your words, you get punched in the face, you deserved it because you didn't use your words. That's the only way you're going to win fights, George, is you're smaller and everyone's older than you. You must learn language to settle disputes." So that was my mom's answer. And so from that point forward, I decided, wow, I better start understanding what people are saying. I better start using my words to understand the world better, to get myself out of these situations that I seem to get myself into. And the situations when I look back on it, I can remember so many people saying to me, "What do you think? What are you, a smart ass?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, better than a dumbass." And that's when things would get bad for me. But it was this beginning to understand language as the world around me. And yeah, you can say things that paint the world in a way that makes things difficult, or you can use your words to paint the world around you in a way that is beautiful or funny, even better. And so for me, that was the beginning of me non-conforming. was beginning to see this world of language and beginning to see that the way I see the world isn't the same way other people see it. How could it be? Everyone has their own lens of seeing the world differently. And so that was my introduction into being a nonconformist, is that like, okay, I don't see the world the same way. I am tired of being smaller and younger and behind everybody. So I must continue to see the world. I must continue to non-conform to this world, because the world, if I conform to the world, I'm always going to get beat up. I'm always going to be smaller. I'm always going to be younger. So I have to find a way to not conform to the world around me, but also be successful in it. So I think that this idea of non-conforming is taking the path of least resistance. And I think everybody should try to do it. The younger, the better. The sooner you find yourself in a situation that is dangerous, is the sooner you find yourself on a path to becoming the person you want to be. Whether it's through, there's two ways that people become better. One is through inspiration, and one is through desperation, and they lead to the same spot, right? If you can be inspired, you can see someone, you can follow that path. Or, holy cow, I'm going to get hammered, I better do something. Desperation tends to be a bigger, more powerful force, because you have no options, you have no escape path, you're desperate. And so I think that these ideas of inspiration and desperation look a lot like the double helix, right? Like they look like they cross, but they're just, you're moving up the stairway, man.
Yeah.
And so that's how I began my path of non-conforming. And I've been lucky enough, whether through inspiration or desperation, to stay on that path.
It's quite interesting. And I genuinely thought after you told about your parents divorced at age 12, right?
Yeah.
It's like we need to have an episode, because I always have this interesting idea in my head where the question is it better for the kids if the parents understand it's not good to stay together and they live? That's also going to break the kid, if the
Yeah.
kid is going to just go to one parent or sharing and so on. I don't know. I only see movies and see how it works. Maybe it's how it works, I don't know. We'll talk more about that. The other is in India, which happens 90% of the times, parents don't get divorced and they stay in the same house, right? Which is worse?
It's a good
Because
question.
yeah, because I do not have enough conversations, with people who have lived in a house of divorced parents, like going to maybe one parent in the weekends and staying with another one during the week. For me, it's the second case, right? And all the people, at least in India, I talk to, it has now become such a, I try to break stereotypes in my head, but it's really hard, because the more I talk to people, it's all the same stories where, oh yeah, parents fight, not a happy childhood. And I think after our last podcast, I was talking to this guy who's a CEO of a company in US based off on Miami. They are using psychedelics to help with sexual dysfunction,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was asking, how did you get introduced to this? And he was saying, since he didn't grow up in a happy household, his first experience with psychedelics showed a lot of the traumas that was there. Now I love it. That is driving him to create happy homes, and that's what he was saying. It's, I want happy home for a kid, and yeah, of course, sex is going to be a greater part of it. This is one more thing that I heard recently, where yeah, I suck at having privacy. It's okay. There is nothing private. So married men and women in India that I know of, like, yeah, they stay together. Like, for example, my parents, they don't sleep in the same bed or same room. So this question being asked to another guy, This guy asked his mom, why don't you guys, like sleep together, right? Oh, the purpose of her marriage was just to have kids. Once it's done, there is no point in sleeping together, right? And how is that relevant to this CEO guy? Was the CEO guy was saying how much sex is also important as a healing component of relationship. Right now, l- it is not that. I think sex is being overused in relationships, so it has become an hindrance, right? So going from one extreme to the other, that's my point, right? Like you have parents divorced, I feel like it's another extreme, like a kid in a different way. And you have kid parents who think kid is the reason they are going to stay together, which is so detrimental for the kid, right? And how does this where do you find the balance, right? And for me, I think that all led me to having like, until you're able to have a clear sense of mind. And I think for me all the answers come down to self-awareness at the work at individual level, right? You talk about nations, it goes from individual to society to cities to states to nations to countries to global. Same with relationships, I would say. How do I know more than this is the person I want to stay with, I want to have a kid? How do people know that it is a compulsive disorder, or is it something that is born out of purely survival instinct, or is it something based on desire, or like in India as an insurance policy? Because back in those days parents had kids in large numbers so that even if the more work they do, they can take care of us when we are old. That was the concept. It's plain simple concept, nothing wrong in it. Times have changed, so it's just a little different now. I asked this thing very specifically about kids because people, many people quote going through childbirth as a very psychedelic journey, right? I cannot talk about that because I haven't had the experience. But is I feel like people, if they have the idea before they go into it, is it a good thing? It's like it's the same, right? If you can ask someone to try psychedelics with an open mind, but I don't think we can say this is it, because the work is post trip, right? So all these actions that we do that are based out of what, where does this originate? You said there are two ways actions are formed in this life. I think eventually I'm getting there. I'm sorry if I lost you
It's
in
good.
between.
No, I'm with you.
So inspiration and desperation, right? But what if both inspiration and desperation can be originating out of fear? Is there a way for us to live beyond fear? So, if we lived beyond fear, would that stop us being creative and produce actions? Because I feel inspiration is nothing but positively doing something in a very positive mindset to get there. Desperation is with a negative mindset that I won't have a life if I don't get there. Right? It's only that slight difference. But the question comes, why does someone need to get there? Right?
Mm.
What is driving them to get there? So in that case, inspiration and desperation seems to be just the path you take. But I still, my question comes down to, what is the push? Why are we taking that push? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. It's the transcendental object at the end of time pulling us.
Repeat that again very slowly.
Yes, the push. It's not so much a push as it is a pull. It's the transcendental object at the end of time calling to us, reaching through us.
What's the end of time?
Well, I can't give you all the answers because you have to learn them for yourself. But I can tell you that, at least in my opinion, we're part of something that we can understand. You know, the world is not only stranger than you imagine, it's stranger than you can imagine. And the same way that a salmon swims upstream to get to the point in which it was born so it can be born, the same way the birds can harness the magnetic field to fly south for the winter. There is a knowing, there is something in us that we can't explain because words fail, but we're drawn to it. Call it God or Allah or Buddha or divine nature. Each one of us has a sort of sine qua non or some sort of moral compass or some sort of a magnetic pole that is being attracted by another force that's bigger than we can imagine. And you know, we use limited language like inspiration or desperation, but like you said, they're the same, they're different parts of the same coin. And same as fear and love, like maybe you act out of fear or you act out of love, but you act. I can't thoroughly explain what that push is, but we're being pulled towards it. And there is, it's almost, you know, I just wrote some stuff down that was really close to this point. It's this trilogue of chaos, creativity, and imagination. And I think that there's it's that relationship between them that pull us. And it's the planet undergoing a destiny. We're a thought in the mind of a divine being. And we don't understand that our thoughts run together. The thought of Ranga has somehow run into the thought of George. The same way that if I took drops and I took a dropper and I dropped them onto a board, those drops would come together the same way Mercury pulls itself together if it's allowed to. The same way you and I pull ourselves together. And the same way we pull ourselves together, our friends are now joining. Like, look at this organic structure that has happened with you and me and Benjamin and our friend in Bali and our friend in Maui. Like, we're beginning this organic procedure of coming together. The same way that mycelium grows under the ground, so too do we above ground form our own network. And by forming our own network, we become one. So I think the pull is to become united. It's to become one. It's the Queen dying so that Prince Charles can fail faster and the governments can fall and we can become united. Like, we are evolving into a super organism. And that's what this pull is. That's why there's a need to get there. That's why there's a need for us to be better. That's why it's sad to say that some people are failing and some people are losing, but it's necessary. And that is the there. And I think that's why we're all struggling, fighting to get better, is because that's what's going to drive us forward, is that we're all better and that we're realizing it. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but there is, and it's a lack of language. Like, it doesn't have to be inspiration or desperation, but that's all my limited brain can come up with right now, is that these are the two forces driving us. And you call it inspiration, desperation, fear, love, but there's these four horses that are pulling this cart towards the future of a better world. And it may not seem like that at times, but it is. I think kids are better today. They're smarter today, and that they're different today. And if you just look back at where we were 200 years ago, you can see evolution taking place. You know, and I wish I could give you the 100-foot view, but I can only see through my eyes as an individual. You know, is even though at times on a really good psychedelic experience, I can get a better view, which I think helps steer me in the right direction. It's difficult to do it on a daily basis, but yeah, you know what? I wanted to talk real quickly too about, I don't know what's better if parents stay together or they get divorced. I can tell you that in high school, I was in a class that was like they had these classes sometimes that were like, they called them AP classes or whatever. And they were for people that were, I don't know if they were smarter or whatever, but they were classes that were geared towards a higher learning. And I remember sitting in this class and the teacher says, how many of you here parents are divorced? And all my friends in high school their parents were divorced. And I don't know if that's self-selecting, but in this particular class, I raised my hand and I looked up and I was the only one. I was the only one in that entire class. Teacher said, how many of you come from a broken family? Boom, and just automatic. And I looked around and that was the first time I realized, like, whoa, these are all, like, I don't hang out with any of these kids in this class, but I understand them and I understand what's going on in this class. And I was the only one to raise my hand. And I was like, and then it started hitting me like, oh, I wonder what it's like to have parents check your homework every day. I wonder what it's like to have two parents sacrificing their entire life so that the kid can have a better life. And I never forgot that. And today, my kid goes to a really good school and I'm really blessed and I feel really thankful for that. But I would say the majority of kids at school, all their parents are together. A lot of the parents are older. A lot of parents have a lot more. A lot of them have a lot more than I have as far as when it comes to a financial setting. And so I honestly believe that if you can stay together and you're cordial as parents, you should do that at least until your kid is 18. And because when you have kids, it's no longer your life. Like you should be sacrificing so that your kid has a better life. And if you can't, if you are a slave to your passions and you see this attractive person run by and you're like, I'm just going to chase after him. Like you're kind of failing as a parent. Like you should get past that, and like maybe the person you're with is not as attractive as they were when they were 20, but hopefully you are together with them for more than what they look like. Hopefully as you grow together, I've heard it said that there's two kinds of love. There's physical and there's mental. And that mental love should far outweigh the physical love as your relationship grows. The same way that a mature plant grows mature roses, so too should your love grow in that way. And you should feel more loving and caring and passionate about the relationship you've built. Maybe in the beginning you're attracted to certain things, but towards the end of the relationship, you're more attracted to these other things. Like I'll sit down and talk to my wife for hours just about crazy things that I think are crazy, and it's funny to me because sometimes recently she was sitting down with her coworker and her coworker said, what are you going to do this weekend? Oh, we're going to go to the beach. And then me and my husband will probably just sit down and talk about stuff for a few hours and make dinner. And her coworker was so blown away. Like, wait, you're going to talk to your husband for hours? What do you guys talk about? And my wife's like, whatever. Like we talk about all kinds of stuff, but she was telling me how blown away her coworker was that we sat down and talked, Yeah. And I think it's so beautiful. And I wish more people would do it. It's so easy to get distracted. It's so easy to hear the siren song of money being yelled out to you. It's so easy to have that siren call to you and you'll be crashed upon the rocks of like, we don't have enough. We don't have a nice car. We don't have a big house. We don't have all these things. But like, that's just noise. Like you have everything if you have somebody you love. You have everything if you have a child that's healthy. You have everything if you have your health and your freedom and a relationship where someone wants to be with you. Like think about how amazing this person wants to be with you. They want to listen to you. They want to help you. And your kid sees that. Like your kid, the first person your daughter a woman falls in love with is her father. The first person a boy falls in love with is his mother. And you're teaching them about relationships by having a good one. And I wish I had friends that went to counseling and like people should go to counseling before they get married. Like you should sit down with a third person and have that third person say, what's going to happen, right? You're going to get in fights and you're going to get mad at each other. You're going to hate each other sometimes. You know that, right? You're going to be okay with that? You're going to see some people that are much more attractive. You know that, right? What are you going to do when that happens? What are you going to do when you haven't slept for 2 days because the baby's been crying? What are you going to do when your wife is having trouble breastfeeding? What are you going to do when everybody hates you? Like, what are you going to do when you feel like there's nowhere to turn? Because that's going to happen. How are you going to get over that? Like, people should sit down and have that conversation before they get married. And people do. And the people that do have a better relationship. The people that do understand what to expect. And if you don't have that, if you came from a broken home where your dad was like, you know what, I'm over this, or your mom was like, you know what, I just got drunk and I cheated, like, that's a horrible thing. And I wish more people would see that. But unfortunately, if you didn't come from a relationship where you were taught how to deal with tragedy, then those things that call to you, these potential things that can ruin relationships, be it lust or greed or selfishness or tiredness, or all these little things can call to you and be a reason to fracture relationships unless you've done the work. Especially if you come from, like, I came from a broken home, so it seemed to me, oh well, it happens, you just get divorced. No, it doesn't have to be like that. So we should have a whole conversation on.
Definitely,
It's
I think
beautiful.
so. It's quite interesting because what you said with respect to going to counseling before that,
Yeah.
I truly agree. It's the place where we can. I don't agree with you when you say you you know what to expect. I genuinely believe drop all expectations with everything in
That's
this world.
probably
That's
really well put.
makes it really really easier. Like, just you don't, when you put hand in water, it feels like uh, the water doesn't fight you. It gives you way, and then it encompasses you, right?
Yes.
So when you're fluid with the world, it is to say that whatever that happens, I'm just gonna let it be. So again, it all comes to just rambling the same line. But apart from that, it's to the part that I believe relationships as portrayed by media are utterly nonsense,
It's
right?
so true, man. It's
It's
so true.
completely nonsense. And
Yeah.
the fairy tales and all the things that are written for one purpose, but people get into a different idea. Beauty and the Beast, they don't see that the fall in love the beast and it's going to turn into a prince. Rather, they say, where is my prince?
Yeah.
Right? We jump these old things. So we have expectations. I feel like I had to rewire my whole brain and ask so many questions about relationships because I just got into my first relationship just like that, right? And I had no idea. And I wasn't having expectations, but I had a lot of frustration and like changing my own habit patterns or being this, you interact with one more person, what originates out of it is a different individual thing, right? You combine to form this new creature, right? That didn't happen, right? Because there is a lot of resistance to ideas, and there is this consistent battling. So counseling would be a great way to go and sit rather than expect, like, okay, first of all, yeah, forget expectations, let's throw the garbage out. Happily ever after is not a truth, maybe after you
Yes.
die. But now let's come to what is that we want. And the question, the reason I ask you the question, right? Like, you were saying either fear or love motivates us to act. My question goes to a little behind and ask, like, why do we need to act, right? But your answer about the whole thing was amazing. I think it was my acid trip. Just as much as you can, sum it up
Yeah.
in this limited language. So you don't, as much as you feel you're not conveying it. I understand what you mean. It's very difficult for me. It came to this point where I was just wondering, like, in sometimes in my acid state, I just want to be and completely not act, completely not intervene with anything, and it seems beautiful, right? So as the walls and barriers start coming up, right, you're going towards the end of the phase, it becomes introspective. And my only question was, why am I gonna do what am I gonna do? I told you that I was gonna have the podcast that Monday, like last Monday, Labor Day, right? We didn't have it because I think LSD takes away a lot of the motivation that's usually driving, which I see as a great thing. For me, it's about two things that drives my actions: either complete fear, or I want to use that to remind myself to be here now. Those are the two things I feel like are driving my life. And if I start seeing the same thing in all people, artists, or anyone, and you see monarchy and stuff, I feel it's purely based out of fear, right? I'm gonna lose my thing. Gotta keep it. This is one thing I think on the coming down of acid. I was having this discussion, right? And it's crazy. We kind of say we feel like we are limited to this body, and that too we are not. We don't believe it to be true, because when you truly die, right? There is no death for the body. It just becomes food for fungus, you know
Yep.
uh, or you burn it, it goes into air, smoke, and it's still part of the world. We really don't leave it. We are not going anywhere. But that's the problem. We don't get limited to our body either. We are limited to an idea of us within a head. That's the complete lie we live with. That is the whole problem that drives us. It's how I was talking. I think each episode, I think I have to mention it once. Just we need to come back to our senses. Our reality lies here, right? Whatever that is happening in our head, it's it's the world for us, but it's gradually changing. It's gradually changing, and we have to change along with it, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is defined. I don't know how many people right now could just give up their names and, take up numbers. I think that was a discussion last time, right? Why not take up numbers? I understand on a different perspective why you cannot take numbers, but why not take numbers, right? Let go of your names and something else, because I feel like as much consciously when we get to a state like with psychedelics, right? When we come back, we got to do all these things. And I love the part what you said, that I talk with people about death to make myself uncomfortable. I think that's extremely true, which I have not noticed until now. I think their uncomfortability is going to drive me, because their awkwardness is
Yes.
going to make me awkward, right? And I having known that I am the precursor for that, it's like that's a beautiful experience.
Yeah, it really
It's
is. It is. I love the way
like
you do it.
not anymore. I think we were doing that while we had guests coming in during our Airbnb phase, but not anymore. So gotta find out new ways to invite people. But I think consciously we have to push ourselves to be very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. And because when we get into that area of uncomfortability, right, it's a little bit going out of your imagination. Let's come back to that creativity and imagination for a bit,
Yes.
because I think imagination as such is just a tool, like a knife, like psychedelics, like a gun, anything, right? It's based on who uses it, right? Imagination doesn't always lead to creativity. Imagination is the utmost reason for 99% of the anxiety cases. The rest 1% might be physiological reasons. But without imagination, I don't think anxiety would. If I'm able to only imagine tomorrow, then I would imagine what and all happens with the tomorrow, right? So how do we turn that tool of imagination into creativity to help us be creative? I think that all comes back to that being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
We have to get out of the idea, get out of the prisoning thought that we have, which, as much as it seems supportive and we don't want to let go, right? And when you step out, you feel much more comfortable, but you have to step out. That
Yeah.
idea of stepping again, this is why one of the things you wrote, right? We were talking about the metacognition of thinking about thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is exactly that, right? When we think about thinking, when we think about thoughts, it is not reality again. Because in truth, when we really step out of it through actions or whatever ways, we realize this is also a comfortable state, right? For example, my beard or hair or my way of life, what I consume, whatever I thought would have been uncomfortable is not uncomfortable. I'm just not accustomed to it, right? But if I keep on thinking, it's same with I think addiction. My friend and I have had this talk about cigarettes, right? Oh,
Mhm.
I can quit it whenever I can, because when we think about it, it seems like that. But I smoke cigarettes, and sometimes it's really hard. You out of sight, out of mind works, but it's more so like, man, it's just one harmless smoke, right? You think about it, it's just one harmless smoke. What's gonna happen, right? You're not comprehending the whole of the effect, which I'm not saying you want to do it that way, but in that moment, what pushes you, right?
Mhm.
Instead of, if we just think about it, it doesn't lead to the right solution. It doesn't, because if we are all able to think, thinking is there across all, as a common thing in humans, right? It's not like you can find someone and they say, oh, they are not thinking. Oh, very good, enlightened. But we all think. So thinking with a particular context and futuristic perspective, let's say, or with past details, is kind of what imagination is, right? Would you define imagination that way, or do you have a different definition before I go on? What is imagination for you?
I would say that imagination is the process one uses to def- I almost have it. Bear with me for a minute. Imagination is the tool one uses to translate vision into reality. And I think that is I don't want to derail your thought, but I would just say is that is why we have a there. That may be the pull. Like maybe imagination is the first step, the tool we use to translate vision into reality. Because in our minds, it's not real until we put it into the world. And once you put it into the world, it becomes different. It is a part of the process of creativity. And I think that maybe that is I think it's the process of translating vision into reality.
Okay, in that case, then, doesn't creativity precede even having that vision?
Does
Where does
create
creativity fall in your chain of
create
thought?
okay,
Yeah.
creativity is the act of manifesting. So once I've used my imagination to come up with the idea, and then once I make this thing real, it becomes creative. I imagined I could have a podcast. When I began talking into the microphone, that was the creation of the process. So I would say creation is a manifestation of imagination. It it's making it tangible.
Okay. Yeah, I think I had a different idea to creativity, because for me, I think it doesn't come into the manifest form. None of this. Most of the dialogues stays in unmanifest, because if we are just nothing more than a thought in Brahma's head, right? That's purely on one reality, it's unmanifest, completely unmanifest, right? In a different sense of reality, it is in manifest form. So in that aspect, for me, it always felt like, for the last year at least, creativity happened in the space of preceding thought, right?
Okay.
instead of when you're looking at something, right? Creativity is just, I think there is nothing new we create in this world, like nothing new. We just, everything is already there. We just take here and join it together, you know. So like it's
I
one
can see
of the
that.
kind of the easiest things we do. We have a lot of narration about hard work and stuff, but as you said about the path of least resistance,
Hmm.
right? I think that is very true when it is at least very much in working with creativity. It is to let be of your state and it just happens, right? So
Hmm.
one of the reasons for me manifest forms doesn't apply to how I think is because you take people like Albert Einstein,
Hmm.
Newton, right? They go, or Tesla, right? They go into the space where they are creative, they write these formulas, but they don't do anything with it. Maybe they do, but someone else is gonna use it to make it into a model, or a working model where it
Yeah.
can be appreciated, because all their theoretical formulas, people, it's because people give credit that this is the origination of all the systems. People understand, if somewhere to read the actual work of Einstein, they'd be like, I don't want to do this. This is dry. It's dry theoretical work. It's with symbols that I just want to puke at, right? So, and at that point, that piece of paper doesn't seem like it's creative, but the creativity is there. It's there. It's beautifully there. It's present in their head and it's flowing through. I think that's where your thing, your definition, I truly agree with. I think it's how we have terms in our head, right? For me, imagination has been this thing because I've never felt like I've been a creative person my whole life. So every time I used my imagination is always to drive myself into sadness, right? If what if tomorrow this could happen, that could happen, and I had shit ton of man. I realized the potential of human brain because I know how much you can go and fuck your day up. Right, it's crazy, and to think to suspend all those is the only hard work we do, because it's like walking, right? The initial part seems like hard, or learning instrument, right? It's the initial seems like hard, but once you get into it just happens naturally. And the creative mindset is one of those which is going to happen very naturally without you focusing on it. If But there is no prerequisite work like learning an instrument. You don't go to the website and type like, what are the notes, what am I going to do with guitar, am I going to learn strumming patterns, or I'm going to play notes, or what am I going to do? You don't have this with creative mindset. You don't have a prerequisite to attain creative mindset. It's one of those places where you let go of the concepts that's holding you, because if with concepts you're imagining a situation that's gonna you're only perceiving through the eyes of the past. So creativity, you cannot join this and this. It might seem so not linkable. How could it? This doesn't belong here. That belongs there, right? This line that we have drawn is the concept, right? So imagination can use that concept to create that gap, but the same imagination can remove that concept, and creativity, I feel like, arises. you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. It makes me wonder. It makes me wonder, like, maybe that is why, maybe that is one thing we learn from suffering, is to imagine ourselves in pain so that we don't have to actually go through the pain. Or maybe in some of our conversations, it's like maybe we push back on people's ideas so that we get to see the world differently. Maybe that's the purpose of war. Maybe that's the purpose of argument, is so that we can have someone destroy our boundaries and we can see the world we never have before. Maybe that's what it takes. Maybe that is part of the creative process, is destruction. You hear terms like creative destruction. Like, what is creative destruction? Well, that's when we're going to just destroy everything so we can rebuild it. Like, well, I don't know if that's a good thing to do, but it seems to be a process that happens cyclical. And I heard a great quote that kind of sums some stuff up, is like, Your reality is reality, even though it's not reality in actuality. It's a fancy way of saying, the things you think are real, even though they're not real. Because if you believe it, you act out in a way that is, and that's enough. It's true enough for you to think something, because then that allows you to walk down that path of your reality. And it's Ranga, I feel like I'm just getting started. I could talk for 3 more hours. I feel like we're just beginning to scratch the surface of this, and I really enjoy having conversations where we can have a free-flowing conversation. We can push back and we can think about things. And especially the idea of us coming from such different backgrounds and yet arriving at so many of the same conclusions, albeit in different parking lots. If that kind of makes sense. I really enjoy this. And I hope I'm being clear enough about saying that. I think it adds a lot of value to not only myself, but people listening. And I wish I didn't have to leave right now, but I do. It's unfortunate. And I wanted to, there's 2 amazing people. One is that are in the comments right now. And before I leave, I wanted to give you a moment to answer some of these people. There's a gentleman that has been here before, Eric Crawford. Thank you very much for coming in and being here. We value your opinion here. And I want to put this onto the chat for you to pontificate on rather quickly here, Ranga. What do you think about the idea that if we could clear our minds and filter out the negativity and absorb the love around us and the goodness around us, do you think that that would create a better imagination for us, Ranga? What do you have to say to Eric Crawford?
I agree. It's true. It's the part again, where do we draw the line to understand which is good, which is bad, which is negative, which is positive? Because I think that's where we do not clearly know, right? Let's go back to the one thing you said, where parents should let go of their lives when they get together for a kid. But this is the same explanation they use in India, and they stay together, and that ruins a child's life. So what you said came out as a really good statement, but on a practical level, it is not applicable, right? So at the individual level, it is about being self-aware. Negativity and positivity are these temporary things which we can keep on changing, right? We can start somewhere, we can keep on changing. I think love is just the universal common between all beings, and it's the source behind creation. So I will not disagree with that. It's about, if we use our, I really agree with the part where he says clear our minds. How do you clear our mind? We need a practice, that's all. But thinking is not the practice. We cannot say I'm gonna do good. That won't work simply. So clear the minds. What is left is love.
Now
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So this brings up on the topic of love and beauty and relationships and potentially having kids. I would like to show you this comment here. Here's a very beautiful person, an incredible person that brings up this beautiful, and I think you would really love this person. I think that this is someone that makes you better, Ranga. So what do you have to say to this comment? If you think of something, it's already happened or happened in another parallel universe or somewhere.
She and I, we talk about this almost every day because the thought comes, and there is also the idea that I'm so bad to have this thought, right? But where is it coming from? If a thought is coming, and if it, at your judgmental level, if it's harmless and it's not intervening other people's space, it can happen, or it's already happened, right? Maybe in a parallel universe, or it's just something that's meant to be. Your end of times driving us, right? It's like that.
Fantastic. Ranga, I really enjoy it, my friend. And I will talk to you soon. I'll reach out to you.
Yes.
I hope you have a fantastic day. And I really am thankful for our conversations. I'll talk to you soon, my friend. That's all we got for today. Where can people find you? What do you got coming up? And what are you excited about?
I think the answer remains the same because there is no action yet, right? So whatever from the last week podcast soon, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to everybody out there. We really appreciate it. So that's all we got for today. Aloha. All right. I'm going to end it right there.